Right now, 4.2 billion people are fighting the same invisible battle, and 97% of them are losing without even knowing it. Here's the shocking truth. Your brain is under attack. Every notification, every ping, every just one more scroll is rewiring your neural pathways in ways that would terrify neuroscientists 20 years ago. And the worst part? You've been trained to enjoy it. In the next 12 minutes, you're going to discover why your attention is being stolen, why the modern brain struggles to focus, and exactly what's happening inside your skull every time you reach for your phone. This isn't about willpower. This isn't about discipline. This is about understanding the invisible war being waged for your most valuable cognitive resource, your focus. And once you understand it, you'll never see your digital world the same way again. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you sat with a single task, just one, for an uninterrupted hour? No phone checks, no email refreshes, no quick glances at notifications. If you're like most people, you genuinely can't remember. And that's not your fault. That's by design. A 2023 study from the University of California, Irvine revealed something stunning. The average person now switches tasks every 47 seconds when working on a computer. 47 seconds. That's not enough time to form a complete thought, let alone engage in deep work. And here's the part that should make you sit up straight. It takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to fully regain focus after a single interruption. Do the math. If you're interrupted just 3 times in an hour, you've effectively lost that entire hour to attention residue, the cognitive fog that lingers when your brain is still processing the previous task while trying to engage with the new one. This is the attention crisis, and you're living in the middle of it. Now, here's what most productivity books won't tell you. The problem isn't that you lack discipline. The problem is that your brain is functioning exactly as it was designed to function, in an environment it was never designed to handle. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for concentration, decision-making, and impulse control, evolved over millions of years to respond to immediate environmental stimuli. A rustling in the bushes, a sudden movement in your peripheral vision, a change in sound pattern. These were survival signals. Your brain was built to notice them instantly because ignoring them could mean death. Fast forward to today. That same ancient neural architecture is now being bombarded with artificial stimuli specifically engineered to trigger those survival responses. Every notification sound, every red badge on an app, every autoplay video, they're all designed by teams of behavioral psychologists and neuroscientists to hijack your brain's reward system. This is why your attention is being stolen. Not because you're weak, because you're human. Stanford's Persuasive Technology Lab, founded by B.J. Fogg, has trained designers from Instagram, Facebook, and Google in the art of what they call captology, the study of computers as persuasive technology. These designers know exactly how to trigger dopamine releases in your brain. They know how to create variable reward schedules, the same psychological mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. And they've built these mechanisms into every app on your phone. You're not fighting your own lack of focus. You're fighting billion-dollar systems specifically designed to capture and hold your attention. Let me introduce you to someone. His name is Alex. Alex is 32 years old. He works in tech, a product manager at a company you've probably heard of. On paper, his life looks successful. Good salary, nice apartment, a title that sounds impressive at dinner parties. But inside, Alex is drowning. Every morning, he wakes up with a plan. Today will be different. Today, he'll finish that proposal that's been sitting in his drafts for 2 weeks. Today, he'll finally tackle the strategic thinking his role requires. And every evening, he goes to bed wondering where the day went. Somehow, 8 hours passed in a blur of Slack messages, email threads, and quick meetings that accomplished nothing. The proposal is still unfinished. The deep work remains undone. And Alex feels something he can't quite name, a mixture of exhaustion and emptiness that grows heavier each day. Here's what Alex doesn't realize. His brain is being systematically rewired for distraction. Every time he responds to a notification within seconds, his neural pathways strengthen the connection between stimulus and response. Every time he context switches between tasks, His brain burns glucose and depletes cognitive resources. Every time he chooses the quick dopamine hit of checking email over the delayed reward of focused work, he's training his brain to crave more distraction. This is the cycle, and it's happening to billions of people, right now, all around the world. But here's what neuroscience also tells us, and this is the part that should give you hope. Neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to rewire itself based on experience and intentional practice. The same mechanism that's been hijacked to create distraction addiction can be deliberately redirected to rebuild your capacity for deep work and sustained concentration. A landmark study published in the Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience demonstrated that focused attention training can produce measurable changes in brain structure within just 8 weeks. The prefrontal cortex, your brain's executive control center, actually grows denser with practice. Your neural pathways for focus can be strengthened, just like muscles responding to exercise. This isn't wishful thinking. This is evidence-based neuroscience. Your brain reset is not only possible, it's biologically hardwired into your neural architecture. But here's the catch. You can't think your way out of this problem. You can't simply decide to focus harder. Why the modern brain struggles to focus has nothing to do with motivation and everything to do with environment and systems. Let me show you what I mean with a simple comparison. Average performers try to resist distraction through willpower. They keep their phones nearby, but promise themselves they won't check them. They leave email tabs open, but tell themselves to ignore the notifications. They swim against the current of their environment, exhausting their cognitive resources in a battle they were never designed to win. Elite performers do something radically different. They don't rely on willpower at all. Instead, they engineer their environment to make distraction difficult and deep work effortless. They understand that the science of focus isn't about trying harder, it's about designing smarter. Cal Newport, the Georgetown professor who coined the term deep work, doesn't just limit his phone usage. He doesn't own a smartphone at all. That might sound extreme, but here's what Newport understands. Every moment you spend deciding whether to check your phone is a moment of cognitive load. Every temptation you resist depletes the same mental resources you need for concentrated work. The hidden cost of multitasking isn't just lost time. It's lost cognitive capacity. It's decision fatigue. It's the slow erosion of your brain's ability to engage in the focused, creative thinking that separates exceptional performance from mediocrity. Now, you might be thinking, this sounds overwhelming. If billion-dollar companies are engineering products to steal my attention and my own brain is wired against me, what chance do I have? More than you realize. Because while the problem is systemic, the solution is surprisingly simple. Not easy, but simple. The answer isn't to fight against your brain's natural tendencies. It's to work with them. To understand how to rewire your brain for focus by using the same principles of neuroplasticity and behavioral design that created the problem in the first place. Think of it like this. Right now, your brain has carved deep neural pathways toward distraction. Every time you reach for your phone without thinking, you're walking down a well-worn path. That path is easy. It's automatic. It requires no conscious effort. But you can carve new pathways. With deliberate practice and strategic environmental design, you can create neural superhighways toward concentration and productivity. The old paths won't disappear immediately, but they'll become overgrown with disuse while your new pathways become the default. This is how to reprogram your mind for deep work. Not through willpower, through intentional rewiring. Here's another pattern I want you to notice. Average performers consume information about productivity. They read the books. They watch the videos. They nod along and feel motivated for about 48 hours. Then they slip back into old patterns, wondering why nothing changes. Elite performers implement systems. They don't just learn about focus. They build structures that make focused work inevitable. They understand that information without implementation is just entertainment. That's exactly what this audiobook is designed to do. Not to give you more information to consume and forget, but to give you a practical, 7-day protocol for rebuilding your brain's capacity for deep work and sustained attention. In the chapters ahead, you'll discover the neuroscience of distraction, exactly what's happening in your brain when you can't focus. You'll learn why traditional advice fails and why most productivity tips actually make the problem worse. You'll master the friction principle, a counterintuitive approach to how to eliminate digital distractions without relying on willpower. And you'll walk through a step-by-step brain reset protocol that leverages neuroplasticity to rebuild your cognitive performance from the ground up. This isn't theory. This is neuroscience-backed strategies for high productivity that you can begin implementing today. Remember Alex? The product manager drowning in distraction? His story doesn't end there. Because Alex discovered something that changed everything. He learned that focus isn't a trait you're born with, it's a skill you build. He learned that his scattered attention wasn't a personal failing. It was a predictable response to an environment designed to scatter attention. And he learned that with the right protocol, he could rebuild his brain's capacity for the deep, focused work that his career and his life demanded. Within 7 days, Alex began noticing changes. The mental fog started lifting. The anxiety that came from constant context switching began to fade. And for the first time in years, he experienced something he'd almost forgotten was possible: the deep satisfaction of sustained concentration on meaningful work. That same transformation is available to you. Not because you're going to try harder, not because you're going to white-knuckle your way through distraction, but because you're going to understand how your brain actually works and use that understanding to reset your neural pathways for focus. Here's what's coming next. In Chapter 2, we're going to go deep into the neuroscience of distraction. You'll discover exactly what happens in your brain when you check your phone, the dopamine cascades, the attention residue, the cognitive load that accumulates with every interruption. You'll understand why the modern brain struggles to focus at a biological level, and why that understanding is the foundation for everything that follows. Because here's the truth: you can't fix a problem you don't understand. And most people have never been taught how their own attention system works. But you're about to learn. And once you do, you'll have something that 97% of people never develop: a clear map for how to rewire your brain for focus in a world designed to keep you distracted. The attention crisis is real, but so is your brain's capacity for change. Let's begin the reset. Chapter 2: The Neuroscience of Distraction. Your brain makes 35,000 decisions every single day. And here's what neuroscience has discovered: the vast majority of them are designed to keep you distracted. This isn't a metaphor. This is biology. Inside your skull right now, there's a war happening between two competing neural systems. One wants you to focus, to engage in deep work, to build something meaningful. The other wants you to check your phone. And right now, for most people, the wrong side is winning. In the next 12 minutes, you're going to understand exactly why. We're going inside the brain, into the dopamine pathways, the prefrontal cortex, and the ancient neural circuits that are being hijacked every time you hear a notification ping. Once you understand the neuroscience of distraction at this level, you'll never look at your own behavior the same way again. And more importantly, you'll finally understand how to rewire your brain for focus, not through willpower, but through biology. Let's start with a structure you've probably heard of but never truly understood: the prefrontal cortex. This is the most recently evolved part of your brain. It sits right behind your forehead, and it's responsible for everything that makes you distinctly human: complex reasoning, long-term planning, impulse control, the ability to resist immediate gratification in favor of future rewards. When you engage in deep work, that state of complete concentration where hours pass like minutes, your prefrontal cortex is running the show. But here's what most people don't realize: your prefrontal cortex is incredibly expensive to operate. It consumes glucose at a rate far higher than other brain regions. It fatigues easily, and it can only maintain intense focus for limited periods before it needs rest. This is why mental clarity feels so elusive. Your brain's executive control center has strict biological limits. Every decision you make, every temptation you resist, every time you force yourself to stay on task, all of it depletes the same finite pool of cognitive resources. Now, here's where things get interesting. Sitting beneath your prefrontal cortex is a much older system: the limbic system, the emotional brain. the part of you that evolved millions of years before logic, language, or long-term planning existed. This system operates on one primary currency, dopamine. And dopamine is the key to understanding everything about why the modern brain struggles to focus. Dopamine is often called the pleasure chemical, but that's a dangerous oversimplification. Dopamine isn't really about pleasure at all. It's about anticipation, about wanting, about the promise of reward. Here's a finding from Stanford's neuroscience department that changed how researchers think about attention and motivation. Dopamine levels spike not when you receive a reward, but when you anticipate receiving one. The notification sound on your phone doesn't trigger dopamine because you enjoy reading emails. It triggers dopamine because your brain has learned that the sound might signal something interesting, novel, or socially relevant. Might. That word is crucial. Variable reward schedules, where the reward is unpredictable, create far stronger dopamine responses than predictable rewards. This is the same mechanism that makes slot machines addictive. You don't know when you'll win, so your brain stays in a constant state of anticipation. Every pull of the lever might be the one. Every check of your phone might be the one. A study published in the Journal of Behavioral Addictions found that the average person touches their phone 2,617 times per day, not because each touch delivers value, but because each touch might deliver value. Your brain is stuck in a dopamine-seeking loop, constantly searching for the next hit of novelty. This is dopamine control gone haywire, and it's happening to billions of people every day without their conscious awareness. Let me tell you what happened to Alex when he finally understood this. Remember, Alex is our 32-year-old product manager. He'd spent years blaming himself for his inability to focus. He'd tried productivity apps, time-blocking systems, even digital detoxes that lasted approximately 6 hours before he caved. Nothing worked, and he couldn't understand why. Then Alex learned about something called attention residue. Here's what happens neurologically when you check your phone while working on a task. Your brain doesn't simply switch from task A to task B. Instead, part of your cognitive processing remains stuck on task A while you attempt to engage with task B. This residue lingers, sometimes for 20 minutes or more, degrading your cognitive performance on everything you do. Dr. Sophie Leroy at the University of Minnesota discovered this phenomenon in her research on task switching. She found that people who are interrupted during cognitively demanding work show measurably reduced performance on subsequent tasks, even after they believe they've fully re-engaged. The implications are staggering. Every time Alex checked Slack while writing a report, he wasn't just losing the 30 seconds it took to read the message. He was losing 20 minutes of cognitive clarity. Every time he glanced at email, he was creating attention residue that accumulated throughout the day like plaque in an artery. By 3 p.m., Alex's brain wasn't tired because he'd worked hard. It was exhausted because he'd switched contexts dozens of times, each switch leaving behind a layer of cognitive debris that made deep work neurologically impossible. This is how to break addiction to shallow tasks. First, you have to understand that shallow tasks aren't just unproductive. They're actively destroying your capacity for the deep work that actually matters. Now, here's where neuroplasticity enters the picture. And this is the part that should give you genuine hope. Your brain is not static. The neural pathways you use most frequently become stronger, faster, more automatic. The pathways you neglect become weaker, slower, more effortful. This is the fundamental principle of brain optimization. Neurons that fire together, wire together. Every time you successfully resist distraction and maintain concentration, you're strengthening the neural circuits for focus. Every time you engage in sustained deep work, you're building cognitive infrastructure that makes the next session of focused work slightly easier. A landmark study from Harvard Medical School demonstrated that just 8 weeks of focused attention training produced measurable increases in gray matter density in regions associated with learning, memory, and emotional regulation. Participants didn't just report feeling more focused. Brain scans showed physical changes in their neural architecture. This is neuroplasticity in action. This is evidence-based methods to improve cognitive control. Your brain is literally being sculpted by your daily behaviors. and you can choose what shape it takes. But here's the flip side, and it's critical to understand. The same neuroplasticity that allows you to build focus also works in reverse. Every time you give in to distraction, you strengthen the neural pathways for distraction. Every time you reach for your phone without thinking, you make that behavior more automatic, more compulsive, more difficult to resist. This is why the attention crisis isn't just about lost productivity. It's about the systematic rewiring of billions of brains towards scattered thinking and away from the kind of sustained concentration that produces meaningful work. Let me show you the difference between how average performers and elite performers approach this neuroscience. Average performers treat focus like a character trait. They believe some people are naturally focused and others aren't. When they struggle to concentrate, they interpret it as personal weakness, which triggers shame, which triggers stress hormones, which further impairs cognitive performance. It's a downward spiral with no exit. Elite performers treat focus like a skill built on biological foundations. They understand that their prefrontal cortex has limits, so they protect it. They understand that dopamine control requires environmental design, not just willpower. They understand that attention residue is real, so they batch their communications and protect their deep work time with boundaries that might seem extreme to others. Here's a specific example. Microsoft's research division conducted a study on their own employees and found that workers who checked email continuously throughout the day showed cortisol levels similar to people in high-stress situations. But workers who batched email into 2 or 3 designated sessions showed significantly lower stress and significantly higher output. Same job, same people, radically different results. The only difference was understanding the neuroscience of how to eliminate digital distractions and designing behavior accordingly. There's another neural phenomenon you need to understand, and it's called the default mode network. When you're not actively focused on an external task, your brain doesn't go quiet. Instead, it activates a network of regions associated with self-referential thinking, mind-wandering, and rumination. This default mode network is important. It's involved in creativity, self-reflection, and consolidating memories. But here's the problem. The constant stimulation of modern life means most people never let their brains enter the default mode naturally. Instead of allowing their minds to wander productively during moments of boredom, they reach for their phones. Instead of processing their thoughts during quiet moments, they scroll social media. The result is that the default mode network gets hijacked. Instead of the productive mind-wandering that leads to insight and creativity, people experience the anxious, unsatisfying mental chatter that comes from a brain that's never truly at rest and never truly focused. Research from the University of Virginia found that many people would rather give themselves electric shocks than sit alone with their thoughts for 15 minutes. That's how uncomfortable we've become with the unoccupied mind. And yet, the psychology of productivity tells us clearly, the ability to be bored is essential to the ability to focus. Deep concentration requires that you can tolerate the initial discomfort of single tasking. If your brain has been trained to expect constant stimulation, that discomfort feels unbearable, even when the task in front of you is genuinely important. This is why rewiring the brain for focus isn't just about adding new habits. It's about unlearning the neural patterns that make distraction feel necessary. Let's talk about what this means for how to enter deep work states consistently. First, understand that deep work is neurologically distinct from shallow work. Brain imaging studies show that sustained concentration activates different regions and produces different neurochemical profiles than task switching. When you're in a state of deep focus, your brain enters a kind of rhythmic pattern where the prefrontal cortex and other regions synchronize their activity. This state, sometimes called flow, doesn't happen instantly. Research from the University of California suggests it takes an average of 15 to 20 minutes of uninterrupted focus before the brain fully transitions into deep work mode. Every interruption resets that clock. This is why the hidden cost of multitasking extends far beyond the time lost to the interruption itself. You're not just losing 30 seconds to check a message. You're losing the 15 to 20 minutes it would have taken to re-enter deep work. Do that enough times, and you never enter deep work at all. Second, understand that the brain's capacity for deep work is trainable but depletable. Most research suggests that even highly trained individuals can sustain intense concentration for about 4 hours per day at maximum. Beyond that, returns diminish rapidly. This means productivity isn't about working more hours. It's about protecting the limited hours when your brain is capable of its best work. It's about brain optimization through strategic recovery, not grinding through cognitive fatigue. Here's where Alex's story takes a turn. Once he understood the neuroscience, really understood it at a biological level, everything shifted. He stopped blaming himself for his scattered attention. He started seeing his distraction patterns as predictable neurological responses, not character flaws. And then he began to experiment. He started protecting his first 2 hours each morning, when his prefrontal cortex was freshest, for his most cognitively demanding work. He turned off all notifications during these hours. He put his phone in another room. He didn't check email until after his deep work session was complete. The first few days were uncomfortable. His brain, accustomed to constant dopamine hits, rebelled against the sudden reduction in stimulation. He felt antsy, bored, almost physically uncomfortable. But by day 4, something shifted. The mental clarity he'd almost forgotten was possible began to return. The anxiety that had become his baseline started to fade. And for the first time in years, he experienced what peak focus actually feels like, the almost meditative absorption in meaningful work. Alex was experiencing cognitive rewiring in real time. His brain was literally restructuring itself around new patterns of attention. This is the power of understanding neuroscience. It transforms focus from a mystery into a mechanism. You're not fighting some vague inability to concentrate. You're managing specific neural systems with known properties and predictable behaviors. You're working with dopamine, not against it. You're protecting your prefrontal cortex, not exhausting it. You're leveraging neuroplasticity, not ignoring it. But understanding alone isn't enough. Information without implementation is just entertainment. In the next chapter, we're going to confront something uncomfortable: why traditional productivity advice fails. Why the tips and tricks you've read in other books haven't worked. Why the hidden cost of multitasking is even deeper than most experts admit. And more importantly, you'll discover what actually does work: the science of focus applied through practical systems that bypass the failures of conventional wisdom. Because here's what most people never realize. The reason you haven't been able to focus isn't that you haven't tried hard enough. It's that you've been given the wrong tools for the wrong problem. That changes now. Chapter 3: Why Traditional Advice Fails. Trying harder to focus doesn't work. But here's what's strange: trying less doesn't work either. The difference between people who achieve deep work consistently and people who struggle isn't about effort at all. It's not about discipline. It's not about motivation. And it's definitely not about downloading another productivity app. The difference is something that almost no one talks about, because admitting it would invalidate an entire industry built on telling you to just try harder. In the next 12 minutes, you're going to discover why everything you've been taught about focus and productivity is fundamentally broken, why the tips that sound logical actually make the problem worse, and why the advice you've been following has been engineered to fail. This isn't comfortable to hear, but it's the truth. And until you understand it, you'll keep spinning on the same hamster wheel, wondering why nothing changes. Let's start with the biggest lie in the productivity industry: the willpower myth. You've heard it 1,000 times. Just put your phone away. Just decide to focus. Just have more discipline. The underlying assumption is that focus is a choice, and if you're struggling, you're simply choosing wrong. Here's what the science actually says. A landmark study from Case Western Reserve University demonstrated that willpower operates like a muscle, not in the way motivational speakers mean it, but in a much more limiting way. Willpower fatigues. It depletes. And once depleted, it cannot be restored through determination alone. Researchers had participants resist freshly baked cookies while working on puzzles. Those who had to exercise self-control over the cookies gave up on the puzzles 60% faster than those who didn't face the temptation. Same puzzles, same people. The only difference was that one group had already spent their willpower reserves. This is called ego depletion. and it explains why the modern brain struggles to focus despite genuine effort. Every morning, you wake up with a limited reservoir of self-control. Every decision you make, every temptation you resist, every notification you ignore, all of it drains from the same pool. By mid-afternoon, most people are running on cognitive fumes, which is exactly when the important deep work usually needs to happen. The advice to just focus harder ignores this biological reality entirely. It's like telling someone with an empty gas tank to just drive faster. But it gets worse. Most productivity advice doesn't just ignore the willpower problem, it actively makes it worse. Let me show you how. Consider the typical recommendation for how to eliminate digital distractions. Turn off notifications, but keep your phone nearby. This sounds reasonable. It sounds balanced. It's completely counterproductive. Here's why. Research from the University of Texas at Austin found that the mere presence of a smartphone, even when turned off and face down, reduces available cognitive capacity. Participants who had their phones in another room significantly outperformed those with phones on their desks, even though neither group used their phones during the study. The researchers called this brain drain. Your mind is aware of the phone's presence. Part of your cognitive processing is dedicated to not thinking about it, to resisting the urge to check it. That background processing consumes the same mental resources you need for concentration and productivity. So when productivity gurus tell you to keep your phone nearby, but just don't look at it, they're giving you advice that drains your focus reserves before you even begin working. You're fighting a battle you can't see against an enemy you don't realize is there. This is why traditional advice fails. It treats symptoms while ignoring causes. It demands willpower while depleting it. It creates the illusion of effort while guaranteeing failure. Alex learned this lesson the hard way. For years, he followed every piece of productivity advice he could find. He downloaded apps that blocked social media for set periods. He created elaborate schedules with color-coded time blocks. He set goals, tracked habits, and rewarded himself for completing focused work sessions. None of it lasted more than a few weeks. Every time a system failed, Alex blamed himself. He assumed he lacked mental discipline. He believed other people had some inner strength he was missing. The shame compounded with each attempt, making it harder and harder to try again. What Alex didn't understand was that he was using tools designed for a world that no longer exists. Most productivity systems were developed in an era before smartphones, before social media, before every app on your phone was engineered by behavioral psychologists to capture and hold your attention. These systems assumed a stable environment where the main obstacle was internal laziness, not external manipulation. Using those systems today is like bringing a sword to a drone fight. The weapons don't match the war. Here's another piece of conventional wisdom that sounds logical but fails in practice. The idea that you should build focus habits through small, incremental steps. Start with 5 minutes of focused work, the advice goes. Then build to 10, then 20. Eventually, you'll be able to concentrate for hours. This approach works for some habits. It's great for exercise routines or meditation practices. But for deep work, it fundamentally misunderstands how concentration functions. Neuroscience research from the University of California shows that entering a state of genuine focus requires a transition period of 15 to 20 minutes. During this time, your brain is shifting from its default scattered state into the synchronized neural pattern that enables deep work. If you only practice 5 minutes of focus, you never actually enter the focus state. You spend the entire time in transition, never reaching the destination. It's like trying to learn to swim by standing in ankle-deep water. You're technically in the pool, but you're not experiencing anything that resembles actual swimming. This is why many people report that focus habits don't work for them. They follow the advice perfectly, doing their 5 or 10 minutes of focused work, and feel nothing but restlessness and frustration. They conclude that deep work isn't for them, that they're somehow neurologically different. They're not different. They've just been given advice that makes reaching peak focus biologically impossible. Let me show you the difference in approach. Average performers try to build focus through willpower and incremental habit stacking. They white-knuckle their way through distraction, using mental energy to resist temptation while simultaneously trying to engage with difficult work. They start small, hoping to build tolerance like exposure therapy. Elite performers recognize that this approach is doomed from the start. Instead, they focus on environmental design, changing the context so that focus becomes the path of least resistance, not the path of maximum effort. Consider the novelist Jonathan Franzen. When writing his novels, Franzen famously works on a computer with no internet connection. He's gone further, at times literally gluing the Ethernet port shut and wearing earplugs and a blindfold while writing. This might sound extreme, but Franzen understands something that most productivity advice ignores. The goal isn't to resist distraction. The goal is to make distraction impossible. When distraction isn't an option, you don't need willpower to focus. Concentration becomes the default state because it's the only available state. Your cognitive resources, instead of fighting an endless battle against temptation, are fully available for the work itself. This is the hidden cost of multitasking that nobody calculates. Not just the time lost to task switching, but the mental energy consumed by the constant availability of alternatives. There's another myth we need to dismantle: the belief that busyness equals productivity. Look at most professional environments. Status is measured by how packed your calendar is, how quickly you respond to emails, how many meetings you attend. The person who's always swamped is assumed to be valuable. The person who protects empty space in their schedule is assumed to be slacking. This is exactly backwards. A study from the Harvard Business Review analyzed the work patterns of high-performing executives and found something counterintuitive. The most effective leaders spent an average of 50% of their time in uninterrupted work, far more than their less effective peers, who spent most of their time in reactive mode, responding to whatever landed in their inbox. The high performers weren't busier. They were more protected. They understood that deep work, not email triage, not meeting attendance, not instant message responsiveness, was the source of their actual value. But here's the trap. Most organizations punish this behavior. If you don't respond to emails within minutes, you're seen as unresponsive. If you block your calendar for focused work, you're seen as unavailable. If you're not visibly busy, you're seen as not working hard enough. The incentive structure actively rewards shallow work and penalizes deep concentration. And then everyone wonders why productivity is stagnant despite working more hours than ever. This brings us to perhaps the most damaging piece of failed advice: the notion that you can have it all if you just manage your time better. Time management is a lie. Not because managing time isn't important, but because the framing fundamentally misunderstands the problem. You don't have a time problem. You have an attention problem. And attention operates by completely different rules than time. Time is democratic. Everyone gets the same 24 hours. Attention is not. Your capacity for deep work varies based on sleep, stress, nutrition, environment, and the cumulative cognitive load you've accumulated throughout the day. You can schedule a block of time for focused work. That's easy, but you cannot schedule focus itself. You can only create conditions where focus becomes possible or impossible. Most time management systems ignore this entirely. They treat hours as interchangeable units, assuming that an hour at 9 a.m. has the same cognitive potential as an hour at 4 p.m. after a day of meetings. This is neurologically false. The science of focus tells us clearly, not all hours are created equal. Your brain has peak periods for concentration, typically in the morning when your prefrontal cortex is rested. Using that peak time for email and meetings, then trying to do deep work when you're cognitively depleted, is a recipe for frustration and failure. Yet this is exactly what most people do. They let their best hours get consumed by shallow tasks, then wonder why they can't concentrate on important work in the afternoon. So what actually works? The answer begins with a fundamental shift in thinking. Instead of asking, how do I force myself to focus? You need to ask, how do I design an environment where focus is inevitable? This is the principle of friction, and it's the subject of our next chapter. But let me give you a preview. Friction is the effort required to perform an action. High friction means an action is difficult to take. Low friction means it's easy. Every behavior in your life is influenced by the friction surrounding it. Right now, for most people, distraction has almost zero friction. Your phone is in your pocket. Notifications are enabled. Every app is one tap away. Deep work, on the other hand, has maximum friction. It requires ignoring temptation, managing environment, battling your own dopamine-trained impulses. The solution isn't to fight this imbalance through willpower. The solution is to reverse it, to engineer your environment so that distraction becomes high friction and focus becomes low friction. To design your life so that deep work is the easy path, not the hard one. This is how to rewire your brain for focus, not through gritting your teeth, but through strategic environmental design. Not through adding more effort, but through removing obstacles. Alex discovered this after years of failed productivity systems. The moment he stopped trying to discipline himself into focus and started designing his environment for focus, everything changed. The battle he'd been fighting for years suddenly became winnable, not because he got stronger, but because the battle itself got easier. Here's the uncomfortable truth that the productivity industry doesn't want you to know. Most productivity advice is designed to fail, not because the people giving it are malicious, but because advice that requires constant willpower, that ignores environmental factors, that treats all hours as equal. This advice creates customers who keep coming back for more. If the first book solved your focus problems, you wouldn't need a second book. If the first app worked, you wouldn't download 10 more. The industry thrives on solutions that feel promising but deliver temporary results at best. You're about to learn something different. In the next chapter, we're going to dive deep into the friction principle, the science behind making deep work effortless and distraction difficult. You'll discover specific, actionable strategies for cognitive rewiring through environmental design. Strategies that don't require more discipline, more motivation, or more willpower. Because the goal isn't to try harder at a broken system. The goal is to build a system that actually works. And that system starts with one counterintuitive insight. The path to greater focus isn't adding more effort. It's removing obstacles that shouldn't have been there in the first place. Chapter 4. The Friction Principle. The most productive people in the world share a secret that sounds almost too simple to be true. They don't have more willpower than you. They don't have better discipline. They've just discovered something about human behavior that changes everything. It's called friction. And once you understand it, you'll realize that every struggle you've ever had with focus was never about you at all. It was about the invisible forces shaping your behavior without your awareness. What I'm about to share with you isn't taught in any productivity course. It isn't in the best-selling books about habits and success. It's the hidden architecture beneath every high-performer system, the operating principle they use but rarely explain. In the next 12 minutes, you're going to learn how to eliminate digital distractions without relying on willpower. How to make deep work feel as effortless as scrolling your phone currently does. And how to reverse engineer your environment so that focus becomes your default state, not your daily battle. This is the friction principle, and it's about to change everything. Let's start with a simple question. Why is it so easy to waste hours on your phone, but so hard to spend 30 minutes on meaningful work? The answer isn't motivation. It isn't discipline. It's friction, or more precisely, the absence of it. Friction is the effort, time, or steps required to perform any action. High friction means an action is difficult to initiate. Low friction means it's easy. And here's the insight that behavioral scientists have known for decades. Human beings are extraordinarily sensitive to friction, often without realizing it. A study from Google's behavioral economics team found that placing healthy snacks at eye level in office kitchens increased consumption of those snacks by 23%. The nutritional content didn't change. The taste didn't change. The only difference was 3 feet of vertical distance, a tiny reduction in friction. This same principle explains why you check your phone 150 times per day. The friction is essentially zero. Your phone is in your pocket. Unlocking takes a fraction of a second. The apps are designed to open instantly. Between the impulse to check and the reward of checking, there's almost no resistance at all. Now compare that to deep work. The friction is enormous. You have to find an uninterrupted block of time. You have to resist the pull of notifications. You have to push through the initial discomfort of sustained concentration. You have to actively fight against an environment designed to scatter your attention. This imbalance isn't accidental. It's engineered. And until you reverse engineer it deliberately, you'll keep losing the battle for your own focus. The friction principle works in two directions, and you need to master both. Direction 1. Add friction to distraction. Make the behaviors you want to avoid harder to initiate. Don't just turn off notifications. Put your phone in a different room. Don't just log out of social media. Delete the apps and require yourself to reinstall them each time you want to access them. Don't just close your email tab. Use website blockers that require a 30-second delay before allowing access. Direction 2. Remove friction from focus. Make the behaviors you want to cultivate easier to initiate. Don't just plan to write in the morning. Have your document already open when you sit down. Don't just intend to exercise. Sleep in your workout clothes. Don't just hope to read more. Place the book on your pillow so it's the first thing you encounter at bedtime. This is brain optimization through environmental design. You're not changing who you are. You're changing what's easy. Here's a specific example from Stanford's Persuasive Technology Lab. Researchers found that every additional click required to complete an online purchase reduces conversion rates by approximately 10%. Businesses understand this intuitively. They spend millions removing friction from their checkout processes. Now apply that same principle to your own behavior. Every additional step required to access distraction is like a 10% reduction in the likelihood that you'll engage in that distraction. Stack enough friction, and behaviors that once felt automatic become genuinely difficult. Alex discovered the friction principle almost by accident. After years of failed productivity systems, he was desperate. He'd tried every app, every technique, every piece of advice. Nothing lasted. In frustration, he did something extreme. He gave his smartphone to his wife and asked her to hide it during his work hours. For the first 3 days, Alex was miserable. He experienced what researchers call phantom vibration syndrome, the sensation that his phone was buzzing in his pocket, even when it wasn't there. He reached for it hundreds of times, only to find empty space. His brain, trained by years of dopamine hits, was demanding its fix. But by day 4, something shifted. The constant mental noise began to quiet. The anxiety that came from perpetual connectivity started to fade. And for the first time in years, Alex experienced genuine mental clarity, the feeling of a mind that wasn't fragmented across a dozen incomplete tasks. He hadn't developed more willpower. He'd simply removed the option of distraction. With his phone physically unavailable, his brain stopped expending energy on the decision of whether to check it. That cognitive load, invisible but constant, simply disappeared. This is the power of friction. It doesn't just reduce unwanted behavior. It eliminates the entire category of temptation, freeing your mental resources for the work that actually matters. Now, let me show you the systematic way to apply this principle. Most people try to change their behavior through motivation. They pump themselves up, set ambitious goals, and attack their bad habits with enthusiasm. This works for approximately 72 hours before the motivation fades and old patterns return. Elite performers do something completely different. They conduct what I call a friction audit, a systematic analysis of the forces making good behaviors difficult and bad behaviors easy. Here's how to do it yourself. Step 1. List your 3 biggest focus obstacles. These are the specific distractions that steal most of your attention. For most people, this includes smartphone, email, and social media. But be specific. Which apps? Which notifications? Which behaviors exactly? Step 2. For each obstacle, identify every point of friction between you and the distraction. How many steps does it take to access? How much time? What triggers the behavior? Be ruthlessly honest. Step 3. Add friction at every possible point. The goal isn't to make distractions slightly harder. The goal is to make it so inconvenient that the impulse dies before you can act on it. Let me give you concrete examples of daily habits for deep concentration built on friction engineering. For smartphones, don't keep your phone in the same room while working. Use a timed lockbox that physically prevents access for set periods. Delete email apps entirely and check only on a computer at designated times. Set your phone to grayscale mode, which reduces the visual reward of using it. For social media, delete all apps from your phone, requiring browser access only. Use website blockers with long delay timers. Have a separate browser profile for work that has no social media sites in its history. For email, check at designated times only, perhaps twice per day. Use autoresponders that set expectations about your response time. Move email to a separate device that you only access during specific windows. Each of these tactics adds friction. Individually, they might seem insignificant, but stacked together, they create an environment where distraction requires genuine effort. And suddenly, focus becomes the easier path. Here's where most people go wrong with friction design. Average performers add a little friction and expect immediate results. They turn off a few notifications, keep their phone in a drawer, and declare themselves cured. When they inevitably slip, they conclude that the technique doesn't work for them. Elite performers understand that friction is a game of margins. They don't add one barrier, they add 7. They don't make distractions slightly harder. They make it genuinely inconvenient. They design environments where maintaining focus requires less effort than breaking it. Consider Cal Newport, the Georgetown professor who wrote the foundational text on deep work. Newport doesn't just limit his smartphone use. He doesn't own a smartphone at all. That's maximum friction. You can't check what doesn't exist. Consider author Neil Gaiman, who writes in a cabin with no internet connection. He's described the experience as productive boredom. With nothing to distract him, writing becomes the most interesting available activity by default. Consider Maya Angelou, who rented a hotel room specifically for writing. She arrived at 6:30 a.m., had all distractions removed, and wrote until early afternoon. The friction of leaving her home, going to a separate location, and entering a space dedicated only to work. This friction made deep concentration almost automatic. These aren't quirks of eccentric artists. These are deliberate friction strategies designed by people who understand that focus habits require environmental support, not just personal determination. Now, let's talk about the reverse, removing friction from the behaviors you want. This is equally important, but often overlooked. Making distraction harder is only half the equation. Making deep work easier is the other half. Here's what the research shows. A study published in the European Journal of Social Psychology found that the average habit takes 66 days to become automatic, but this number varies dramatically based on friction. Simple behaviors with low friction, like drinking a glass of water each morning, can become habitual in as few as 18 days. Complex behaviors with high friction can take over 250 days. The implication is clear. If you want focus habits to stick, you need to reduce the friction of starting focused work to the absolute minimum. This means preparing your environment the night before. Have your workspace clear. Have your key document already open. Have your coffee maker ready to brew. Remove every obstacle between waking up and beginning deep work. This means creating what researchers call implementation intentions, specific if-then plans that remove the decision-making friction from your day. When I sit at my desk at 8 a.m., I will work on my most important project for 90 minutes without interruption. The specificity eliminates the cognitive load of deciding what to do. This means establishing bright lines, clear, unambiguous rules that require no interpretation. I never check email before noon is a bright line. I try to limit email in the morning is not. Bright lines reduce friction because they eliminate the mental debate. The decision is already made. Alex implemented all of these tactics. He prepared his workspace each evening. He created implementation intentions for his morning deep work sessions. He established bright lines around email, social media, and smartphone use. The transformation wasn't gradual, it was immediate. On the first day of his new friction design system, Alex completed more focused work by noon than he typically accomplished in an entire week. The capacity had always been there. He'd just been fighting against an environment that made using it impossible. Let me give you one more critical insight about friction. It works on identity, not just behavior. When you design an environment that makes focus easy and distraction hard, something subtle but profound happens. You start to see yourself differently. Instead of someone who struggles with concentration, you become someone who works deeply. Instead of someone who's addicted to their phone, you become someone who isn't controlled by technology. This identity shift is self-reinforcing. The more you see yourself as a focused person, the more you behave in ways that confirm that identity. The behavior builds the identity, and the identity reinforces the behavior. This is cognitive rewiring at the deepest level, not just changing what you do, but changing who you understand yourself to be. Neuroscience confirms this. Brain imaging studies show that identity-based behaviors activate different neural pathways than willpower-based behaviors. When an action feels consistent with who you are, it requires less prefrontal cortex activation, less effort, less cognitive load, less depletion. Through friction engineering, you're not just changing your environment. You're rebuilding your brain's model of who you are and what you do. You're creating the neural foundation for a focused life. Here's your action step from this chapter. Before you continue to the next section, conduct a friction audit on your single biggest distraction. Identify every point where friction could be added. Then add at least 3 new barriers between you and that distraction. Don't wait until tomorrow. Do it now. The difference between people who transform their focus and people who just read about transformation is immediate action. In the next chapter, we're going to tackle something that the friction principle alone can't solve: the addictive loops that have been deliberately engineered into your digital life. You'll discover how to break addiction to shallow tasks at a neurological level, not just adding barriers, but rewiring the impulses themselves. Because while friction can change behavior, true brain optimization requires understanding the dopamine loops that are driving your distraction. And what you're about to learn will show you exactly how to break free. The friction principle is your first line of defense. What comes next is the complete strategy for reclaiming your mind. Chapter 5: Breaking Addictive Digital Loops. You are living through the largest, uncontrolled experiment in human history, and you are the subject. Right now, some of the most brilliant minds of our generation, engineers from Stanford, psychologists from Harvard, neuroscientists from MIT, are being paid billions of dollars to do one thing: capture your attention and never let it go. This isn't hyperbole. This is the documented reality of the attention economy. And unless you understand exactly how these systems work at a neurological level, you will remain trapped in loops designed by people who understand your brain better than you do. In the next 12 minutes, you're going to discover the precise mechanics of digital addiction, not the simplified version, but the actual neuroscience of how your dopamine system has been hijacked. You'll learn why your attention is being stolen through mechanisms you can't see. And most importantly, you'll learn how to break addiction to shallow tasks by targeting the exact neural pathways that keep you trapped. This is the chapter where everything changes, because you can't escape a prison you don't know you're in. Let's start with what's actually happening in your brain every time you check your phone. When you hear a notification sound, your nucleus accumbens, the brain's reward center, releases a small burst of dopamine. But here's the critical detail that most people miss. The dopamine isn't released because of what the notification contains. It's released in anticipation of what it might contain. This distinction is everything. Neuroscientist Wolfram Schultz at Cambridge University discovered that dopamine neurons fire most intensely not during reward, but during the prediction of reward. When a reward is uncertain, when it might be good news or might be nothing, dopamine release is actually higher than when the reward is guaranteed. This is called the variable reward schedule. It's the same mechanism that makes slot machines the most profitable gambling devices ever invented. And it's been deliberately engineered into every app on your phone. Think about it. When you check Instagram, you don't know what you'll find. Maybe someone liked your photo. Maybe someone sent you a message. Maybe nothing happened at all. That uncertainty is precisely what makes it so neurologically compelling. Your brain is caught in a loop of prediction, anticipation, and intermittent reward, the most addictive pattern known to behavioral science. This is dopamine control in reverse. Your dopamine system isn't malfunctioning. It's functioning exactly as designed. in an environment designed to exploit it. Here's where the addiction becomes truly insidious. Every time you check your phone and find something rewarding, a like, a message, a piece of interesting content, your brain strengthens the neural pathway connecting the trigger, notification, to the behavior, checking, to the reward, dopamine hit. This is the fundamental mechanism of neuroplasticity working against you. Over time, this pathway becomes automatic. You stop making conscious decisions to check your phone. The behavior becomes what neuroscientists call a habit loop, a trigger behavior reward cycle that operates below conscious awareness. But it gets worse. As the pathway strengthens, your brain also develops tolerance. The same reward produces less dopamine over time, requiring more stimulation to achieve the same effect. This is exactly what happens with drug addiction. The first hit is the most powerful. Every subsequent hit requires more substance, or more scrolling, more checking, more consuming, to produce the same neurological effect. A study from the University of Maryland asked students to go 24 hours without any media or digital devices. The language they used to describe the experience was striking: withdrawal, cravings, anxious, miserable, jittery. These aren't metaphors. These are descriptions of genuine neurological withdrawal symptoms. Your phone isn't a tool. It's the delivery device for the most sophisticated addiction machine ever created. Alex hit his breaking point on a Tuesday afternoon. He was supposed to be preparing for a presentation, a career-defining opportunity to pitch a new product direction to senior leadership. Instead, he found himself 45 minutes deep into a Reddit thread about something he couldn't even remember now. He hadn't decided to go to Reddit. He hadn't consciously chosen to waste his afternoon. The behavior had just happened. When Alex finally looked at the clock, he felt a wave of despair that went beyond ordinary frustration. This wasn't about time management or productivity. This was about autonomy. His own brain was taking actions that his conscious mind never approved. That's when Alex realized he wasn't struggling with a bad habit. He was fighting an addiction engineered by some of the smartest people on the planet. The presentation went poorly. Alex knew it would. He hadn't done the deep work required to make it great. But something shifted in that failure. For the first time, Alex stopped blaming himself for lack of discipline and started seeing the problem for what it actually was: a design system exploiting predictable features of human neurology. And design systems can be reverse engineered. Let me show you exactly how to break these loops. The addiction cycle has three components: trigger, behavior, and reward. To break the cycle, you need to intervene at each stage. Most people only try to stop the behavior through willpower, and as we've discussed, that approach is destined to fail. The friction principle helps by adding barriers to the behavior. But true freedom requires addressing all three components. Let's start with triggers. Triggers come in two forms: external and internal. External triggers are environmental cues, notification sounds, app icons, the physical presence of your phone. Internal triggers are emotional states: boredom, anxiety, loneliness, stress. For external triggers, the solution is elimination, not management. Don't just turn off notifications, delete the apps. Don't just silence your phone. Remove it from your environment entirely during focused work. Don't just intend to check email less. Block access during your deep work windows. Research from Duke University found that over 40% of our daily behaviors are habitual, triggered automatically by environmental cues. By removing the cues, you short-circuit the automatic behavior before it starts. But internal triggers are trickier. You can't remove boredom from your environment. You can't eliminate the anxiety that makes you reach for distraction. What you can do is build awareness. Here's a technique that neuroscience-backed strategies for high productivity consistently recommend: the urge surfing method. When you feel the pull toward distraction, that restless, uncomfortable sensation that precedes checking your phone, don't fight it and don't give in. Instead, observe it. Notice where the urge lives in your body. Is it a tightness in your chest? A restlessness in your hands? A foggy feeling in your mind? Give the sensation your full attention without acting on it. Here's what neuroscience tells us happens next. The urge peaks and then fades. Every urge has a natural lifespan of approximately 15 to 20 minutes. If you can surf the wave without acting on it, the urge will pass on its own. This isn't just mindfulness advice. This is neurological rewiring in action. Every time you observe an urge without acting on it, you weaken the neural pathway connecting the trigger to the behavior. You're teaching your brain that the trigger doesn't have to produce the behavior. Over time, typically 2 to 3 weeks of consistent practice, the urges become less intense and less frequent. Alex started practicing urge surfing during his deep work sessions. The first few days were excruciating. The pull toward his phone felt almost physical, like an itch he couldn't scratch. But he stayed with the discomfort, observing it without acting. By the end of the first week, something remarkable happened. The urges didn't disappear, but they lost their power. Alex could notice the impulse to check his phone and simply let it pass. The automatic behavior was becoming conscious again, and consciousness is where choice lives. Now let's address the reward component. This is where most people miss a crucial insight. Breaking a bad habit isn't just about stopping a behavior. It's about replacing the reward that behavior was providing. Your phone checks aren't random. They're meeting a need. Maybe it's the need for novelty. Maybe it's the need for social connection. Maybe it's the need to escape from difficult emotions or boring tasks. If you simply remove the behavior without addressing the underlying need, you'll either relapse or substitute one unhealthy behavior for another. Average performers try to eliminate distractions through pure restriction. They white-knuckle their way through the discomfort, feeling deprived and resentful. Eventually, the pressure builds until they binge, checking everything they've been avoiding in a flood of dopamine-seeking behavior. Elite performers understand that sustainable change requires reward substitution. They identify what need the distraction was meeting, then find healthier ways to meet that same need. If you check your phone for novelty, schedule regular breaks where you engage with something genuinely interesting: a book, a conversation, a walk outside. If you check for social connection, prioritize in-person interactions and meaningful conversations. If you check to escape discomfort, develop tolerance for boredom through meditation or simple presence practices. This is how to rewire your brain for focus, not by eliminating reward, but by redirecting it. Not by becoming a monk who renounces pleasure, but by becoming a designer who chooses which pleasures to pursue. There's one more layer to breaking digital addiction loops, and it's perhaps the most important. You need to understand who you're fighting against. In 2017, Ozzy Raskin, the inventor of Infinite Scroll, publicly apologized for his creation. He admitted that Infinite Scroll was specifically designed to eliminate natural stopping points, keeping users engaged longer than they intended or wanted. Tristan Harris, a former Google design ethicist, has testified before Congress about the deliberate manipulation embedded in social media platforms. He's described how persuasive technology is used to exploit psychological vulnerabilities, how design teams run thousands of A/B tests to find the exact shade of red that triggers maximum anxiety in notification badges, the exact timing of likes that creates maximum dopamine response. These aren't accidents. These are the products of billion-dollar research and development programs designed to capture your attention at any cost. When you understand this, your relationship to the addiction shifts. It's not a personal failing. It's not a character weakness. It's the predictable result of a battle between your Stone Age brain and Silicon Valley weapons. And once you see it clearly, you can start fighting back. Here's your protocol for breaking addictive digital loops. Week 1. Conduct an honest audit of your digital behavior. Use screen time tracking to see exactly where your attention is going. Don't judge yourself, just observe. Awareness is the foundation of change. Week 2. Eliminate external triggers ruthlessly. Delete apps, remove devices, use blocking software. Apply the friction principle at maximum intensity. Your goal is to make accessing distractions genuinely difficult. Week 3. Practice urge surfing. When internal triggers arise, observe them without acting. Notice the sensations, let them peak, and watch them fade. Build your capacity to experience discomfort without reaching for escape. Week 4. Implement reward substitution. Identify the needs your digital habits were meeting, then design healthier alternatives. Schedule novelty, connection, and relaxation that don't require a screen. This is cognitive rewiring through systematic intervention. Each week targets a different component of the addiction loop, building toward comprehensive brain reset. Alex followed this protocol with religious dedication. The first 2 weeks were difficult. His brain resisted the change, generating anxiety, restlessness, and powerful urges to return to old patterns. But by week 3, something shifted. The mental clarity he'd experienced briefly during his phone-free experiment became his new baseline. The fog that had clouded his thinking for years began to lift permanently. By week 4, Alex noticed changes that went beyond productivity. His relationships improved. He was actually present during conversations instead of half listening while planning his next phone check. His sleep improved. Without blue light and dopamine spikes before bed, his brain could finally wind down naturally. His mood improved. The constant low-grade anxiety of perpetual connectivity was replaced by a calm he'd forgotten was possible. Alex wasn't just more productive. He was more human. Here's the truth that the attention economy doesn't want you to know. You can win this fight. The systems arrayed against your focus are powerful, but they're not omnipotent. They exploit specific neurological vulnerabilities, and those vulnerabilities can be addressed. They rely on unconscious behavior, and consciousness can be cultivated. They depend on your ignorance, and now you understand exactly how they work. In the next chapter, we're going to build on this foundation. You've learned how to break the addictive loops that steal your attention. Now you'll learn how to enter deep work states consistently, how to build mental resilience, and create the sustained concentration that produces your best work. Because breaking addiction is only half the battle. The other half is building something better in its place. And that's exactly what we're about to do. Chapter 6. Building Deep Work Windows. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine yourself 1 year from today. In one version of that future, you're exactly where you are now. Same scattered attention, same unfinished projects, same frustration at the end of each day, wondering where the time went. The deep work you intended to do remains perpetually on tomorrow's list. In another version, you've mastered something that changes everything. You sit down each morning and enter a state of concentration so complete that hours pass like minutes. The work that used to take you a week now takes you 2 days. Your output has doubled, maybe tripled, but you're working fewer hours, not more. You've discovered how to enter deep work states at will. The difference between these two futures isn't talent. It isn't luck. It's the system you're about to learn. In the next 12 minutes, you're going to discover how to build deep work windows, protected blocks of time where sustained focus becomes not just possible, but inevitable. You'll learn the neuroscience of optimal timing, the architecture of flow states, and the specific protocols that the world's highest performers use to produce extraordinary work. This is where theory becomes practice. This is where your brain reset becomes real. Let's start with a number that will change how you think about productivity forever: 90. 90 minutes. That's the natural cycle of human concentration. In the 1950s, sleep researcher Nathaniel Kleitman discovered that the human brain operates in ultradian rhythms, cycles of approximately 90 to 120 minutes that govern our sleep stages. What researchers discovered later was that these same rhythms don't stop when we wake up. They continue throughout the day, governing our capacity for focus and attention. Your brain is not designed for 8 continuous hours of concentration. It's designed for cycles, periods of intense focus followed by periods of rest and recovery. Fighting this biological reality is like trying to sprint a marathon. You might manage it for a while through sheer willpower, but eventually, biology wins. This is why the standard 8-hour workday produces so little actual deep work. People sit at their desks for 8 hours, but they're fighting against their own neurology for most of that time. The result is exhaustion without accomplishment, the worst of both worlds. A study from the Drogium Group used time-tracking software to analyze the habits of their most productive employees. What they found was striking. The top performers didn't work longer hours. They worked in focused bursts of approximately 52 minutes, followed by 17-minute breaks. Their secret wasn't endurance. It was rhythm. This is the science of focus applied to real-world productivity. Your brain has a natural cadence for concentration. Work with it, and deep work becomes sustainable. Fight against it, and you'll burn out before you accomplish anything meaningful. But timing is only part of the equation. The other part is protection. A deep work window isn't just a block of time on your calendar. It's a fortress, a protected space where the outside world cannot intrude. Without protection, your 90-minute block becomes 90 minutes of interrupted shallow work, which is worse than no block at all. Here's what the research shows about interruptions. A study from the University of California, Irvine found that after an interruption, it takes an average of 23 minutes and 15 seconds to fully return to the original task. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that 44% of the time, people don't return to the original task at all. They get pulled into something else entirely. Now do the math. If you have a 90-minute deep work window and you get interrupted twice, you've effectively lost the entire window. You never reach the state of sustained concentration where your best work happens. You spend the whole time in cognitive transition, never arriving at the destination. This is why protection isn't optional. It's the difference between deep work that transforms your output and shallow work dressed up in productivity clothing. Let me tell you what happened when Alex built his first real deep work window. After weeks of applying the friction principle and breaking his addictive loops, Alex was ready for the next step. He blocked 90 minutes on his calendar from 8:30 to 10 a.m., the time when his energy and mental clarity were highest. But he didn't just block the time. He protected it. He told his team he would be unavailable during this window. He set up an autoresponder on email. He put his phone in a lockbox in another room. He closed every browser tab except the single document he was working on. He even put a physical sign on his office door. Deep work in progress. Emergency only. The first 20 minutes were uncomfortable. Alex's brain, still conditioned to expect constant stimulation, generated waves of restlessness. He felt the urge to check something. Anything. Just to break the monotony of single tasking. But he stayed with it. And somewhere around the 25-minute mark, something shifted. The restlessness faded. The mental noise quieted. Alex found himself absorbed in his work in a way he hadn't experienced in years. Ideas connected. Problems that had seemed intractable suddenly revealed solutions. Time seemed to slow down and speed up simultaneously. An hour passed in what felt like 20 minutes. Alex had entered flow. Flow, the state of complete absorption in a task, isn't mysterious. It's neurologically predictable. Research from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, the psychologist who named and studied flow for over 4 decades, identified the conditions that reliably produce this state. The task must be challenging enough to require your full attention, but not so difficult that it triggers anxiety. There must be clear goals and immediate feedback. And crucially, there must be freedom from distraction. When these conditions are met, something remarkable happens in the brain. The prefrontal cortex, that expensive, effortful part of your brain responsible for self-monitoring and self-criticism, actually quiets down. The inner critic goes silent. The mental chatter that usually fragments your attention disappears. Brain imaging studies show that flow states involve a temporary deactivation of the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the region associated with self-awareness and self-doubt. This is why flow feels so liberating. You're not just focused on your work. You're freed from the constant background noise of self-judgment. This is peak focus at the neurological level, and it's only accessible when you protect the conditions that make it possible. Now, let's talk about how to enter deep work states consistently, not as a rare accident, but as a reliable daily practice. Average performers treat flow as something that happens to them. They wait for inspiration to strike, for the mood to be right, for the stars to align. When flow doesn't come, they assume they're not in the zone and switch to shallow work instead. Elite performers treat flow as something they engineer. They understand that the conditions for deep work are predictable, and they systematically create those conditions every single day. They don't wait for focus, they build it. Here's the protocol. Step 1. Choose your window. Identify the 90 to 120-minute period when your cognitive energy is highest. For most people, this is the first few hours after waking, when the prefrontal cortex is rested and willpower reserves are full. Protect this time ruthlessly. It's your most valuable cognitive real estate. Step 2. Prepare the night before. Decide exactly what you'll work on during your deep work window. Remove all decisions from the morning routine. Have your workspace ready, your materials prepared, your environment optimized. The goal is to minimize friction between waking up and beginning focused work. Step 3. Create a startup ritual. The brain responds to consistent cues. Develop a short routine, perhaps 5 minutes, that signals to your brain that deep work is about to begin. This might include making a specific type of coffee, sitting in a specific chair, playing specific background music, or doing a brief meditation. Over time, this ritual becomes a trigger that helps your brain transition into focus mode more quickly. Step 4. Protect absolutely. During your deep work window, nothing gets through. No email, no messages, no quick questions. The only acceptable interruption is a genuine emergency. And if you're honest, genuine emergencies are extraordinarily rare. Step 5. Time your sessions. Work in 90-minute blocks with 15 to 20-minute breaks between them. During breaks, avoid screens. Walk, stretch, look out a window, let your mind wander. Your brain needs this recovery time to consolidate learning and restore cognitive resources. Here's a critical insight that most productivity advice misses. The quality of your breaks determines the quality of your focus. When you take a break from deep work and immediately check your phone, you're not resting. You're depleting. You're triggering the same dopamine loops you've been working to break, fragmenting the very concentration you've been building. A study published in the Journal of Environmental Psychology found that even brief exposure to natural environments, a walk outside, a view of trees, time in a park, significantly restored cognitive function. Participants who took nature breaks showed improved attention and better performance on concentration tasks compared to those who took urban or screen-based breaks. This is why daily habits for deep concentration include not just the work itself, but the spaces between work. The restoration period isn't optional. It's part of the system. Alex learned to treat his breaks as seriously as his focus sessions. After each 90-minute block, he took a 15-minute walk outside, leaving his phone behind. He let his mind wander without direction, allowing the diffuse thinking that complements focused work. The result was that his second and third deep work windows were nearly as productive as his first. He wasn't depleted by noon. He wasn't fighting cognitive fatigue all afternoon. The rhythm of focus and rest created sustainable productivity that lasted throughout the day. Let me give you one more tool: the deep work shutdown ritual. Most people end their workday abruptly. They stop working, but they don't stop thinking about work. Tasks linger in their minds. Unfinished projects generate low-grade anxiety. Even during evenings and weekends, their brains remain in work mode, never fully recovering. Research on attention restoration shows that incomplete tasks occupy working memory, creating what psychologists call the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency to remember unfinished tasks more than completed ones. This cognitive residue carries into your personal time, degrading both your rest and your relationships. The solution is a deliberate shutdown ritual. At the end of your workday, ideally at a consistent time, you perform a brief routine that signals to your brain that work is complete. Here's an example. First, review every task you're tracking and confirm that each is either completed or captured in a system you trust. Second, check your calendar for the next day and ensure nothing requires immediate preparation. Third, create a brief plan for tomorrow's deep work window. Finally, say a phrase out loud that signals completion: shutdown complete. This ritual provides what researchers call cognitive closure. Your brain, confident that everything important is captured and nothing is forgotten, can finally release work and fully engage with rest. Alex implemented a shutdown ritual at 5:30 p.m. every day. Within a week, he noticed something surprising. His evenings felt genuinely relaxing for the first time in years. He was present with his family instead of mentally rehearsing tomorrow's tasks. He slept better because his brain wasn't churning on work problems. The boundaries between work and rest, once blurred, became clear. Here's what I want you to understand about building deep work windows. This isn't about productivity for its own sake. It's about reclaiming your life from the fragmentation that modern technology has created. It's about being fully present for your work when you work and fully present for your life when you're not working. The hidden cost of multitasking isn't just reduced output. It's reduced experience. When you're constantly half-focused on everything, you're never fully engaged with anything. The richness of life, the depth of work, the connection of relationships, the satisfaction of genuine accomplishment requires the kind of sustained attention that most people have forgotten how to access. Deep work windows give you that access back. In the next chapter, we're going to put everything together into a comprehensive 7-day protocol. The focus reset protocol that will rewire your brain for sustained concentration. You've learned the principles. You've understood the neuroscience. Now you'll get the day-by-day system for rebuilding your attention from the ground up. Because understanding isn't enough. Implementation is everything. And in 7 days, everything changes. Chapter 7. The 7-day focus reset protocol. In the next 7 days, your brain will change more than it has in the past 7 years. That's not an exaggeration. Neuroscience research from University College London has demonstrated that measurable changes in neural pathways can occur within just 1 week of consistent, deliberate practice. The brain you have today doesn't have to be the brain you have next week. Here's the statistical reality. 92% of people who set goals to improve their focus fail within the first month. They fail not because they lack motivation, but because they lack a system. They try to change everything at once, burn out, and return to old patterns feeling worse than before. The 7-day focus reset protocol is different. It's designed around how your brain actually changes, gradually, systematically, and sustainably. Each day builds on the previous one. Each step is small enough to complete, but powerful enough to matter. In the next 12 minutes, you're going to receive the exact day-by-day roadmap for rewiring the brain. Not theory, not principles. The specific actions you'll take each day to rebuild your capacity for deep work and sustained concentration. This is the protocol that changed everything for Alex. And it's about to change everything for you. Before we begin, let me explain why 7 days. Your brain operates on multiple timescales of change. Some changes happen immediately. A new behavior can be performed right away. Other changes require repetition. Habits typically take 21 to 66 days to become automatic. But there's a critical middle ground that most people miss: the neural priming period. Research from the Max Planck Institute for Human Development shows that the first week of any behavioral change is crucial. During this period, your brain is evaluating whether the new behavior is worth encoding. It's testing the waters, gathering data, deciding whether to invest resources in building new neural pathways. If you can maintain consistency for 7 days, you cross what neuroscientists call the commitment threshold. Your brain shifts from resistance to investment. The new patterns start to feel less effortful. The foundation for lasting brain optimization is established. This is why the protocol is exactly 7 days, long enough to create genuine neural change, short enough to maintain motivation. After day 7, you won't need a protocol anymore. You'll have something better, a new default. Day 1, the attention audit. Your first day isn't about changing behavior. It's about seeing clearly. Most people have no idea where their attention actually goes. They have vague impressions. I'm on my phone too much, but no concrete data. This vagueness is itself a barrier to change. You can't optimize what you don't measure. Here's your day 1 protocol. First, install a screen time tracking app on every device you use. Your phone has this built in. Enable it. Your computer likely has options as well. The goal is complete visibility into your digital behavior. Second, carry a small notebook or use a notes app to log every time you feel the urge to check your phone or switch tasks. Don't judge the urges. Don't try to resist them. Just notice and record. Write down the time, what you were doing, and what triggered the urge. Third, at the end of the day, conduct your audit. Add up your screen time. Review your urge log. Answer these questions honestly. Where's my attention actually going? What are my biggest distraction triggers? When during the day am I most vulnerable to focus collapse? This is evidence-based methods to improve cognitive control, starting with data collection. The audit will likely be uncomfortable. Most people discover they spend 3 to 5 hours daily on their phones, far more than they estimated. That discomfort is useful. It creates the motivation for what comes next. Alex's first audit was a shock. He discovered he checked his phone 147 times in a single day. His total screen time was 4 hours and 23 minutes. On a day he considered focused. The gap between his perception and reality was the wake-up call he needed. Day 2. The friction installation. Day 2 is about restructuring your environment. You're going to add friction to distraction and remove friction from focus. Here's your Day 2 protocol. Start with your phone. Delete every app that appeared in your top time wasters from yesterday's audit. Not hide, delete. If you need social media for work, access it only through a browser, never through apps. Move your phone charger to another room, so your phone lives away from your workspace and bedroom. Next, address your computer. Install a website blocker, Freedom, Cold Turkey, or similar, and block your top distracting sites during your planned deep work hours. Create a separate browser profile for work that has no social media sites in its history, no bookmarks to entertainment, no autofill to distraction. Then, prepare your physical environment. Clear your workspace of everything except what you need for focused work. Remove visual clutter that competes for attention. If possible, face your desk toward a wall rather than a window or doorway. Research shows this simple change reduces interruption by external stimuli. Finally, set up your deep work window for tomorrow. Block 90 minutes on your calendar for your first official deep work session. Decide exactly what you'll work on. Prepare all materials you'll need. Average performers make half-hearted environmental changes and wonder why they don't work. Elite performers go to extremes that might seem excessive because they understand that environment shapes behavior more powerfully than intention ever could. Day 3. The first deep work session. Today you enter the arena. Here's your Day 3 protocol. Execute your 90-minute deep work window exactly as planned. Follow the startup ritual you designed. Make your specific coffee, sit in your specific chair, do your brief transition practice. Then begin work on your single chosen task. During the session, expect discomfort. Your brain, accustomed to constant stimulation, will rebel. You'll feel urges to check, to switch, to escape. This is normal. This is the feeling of cognitive rewiring in progress. When urges arise, practice urge surfing. Notice the sensation without acting on it. Observe where it lives in your body. Breathe through it. Watch it peak and fade. Every urge you surf without acting is a small victory, a weakening of old neural pathways and a strengthening of new ones. After your 90-minute session, take a proper break. 15 to 20 minutes away from all screens. Walk outside if possible. Let your mind wander without direction. This recovery period is essential. Your brain needs time to consolidate the focused work you just did. At the end of the day, reflect. How did the session feel? Where did you struggle? What worked? Capture these observations. Tomorrow you'll refine the process. Alex's first deep work session on Day 3 was rough. He counted 23 urges to check his phone during the 90 minutes. His concentration felt scattered and uncomfortable. But he completed the session. He stayed in the arena. That's what matters. Day 4, doubling down. Day 4 is about repetition and refinement. Here's your Day 4 protocol. Execute 2 90-minute deep work sessions today, separated by at least a 2-hour break. Apply everything you learned from yesterday. Refine your startup ritual. Adjust your environment based on what distracted you. Today, add a new element, the capture practice. Keep a piece of paper next to you during deep work. When thoughts arise that don't relate to your current task, I need to email Sarah. I should check on that project. Don't forget to buy groceries. Write them down and immediately return to your work. This externalizes the thought, freeing your working memory to focus on the task at hand. Also today, implement your shutdown ritual. At the end of your workday, review all tasks, Check tomorrow's calendar, create a plan for tomorrow's deep work sessions, and declare shutdown complete. Notice how this closure affects your evening. The mental release when work is truly finished. The psychology of productivity tells us that consistency builds momentum. Day 4 is where momentum starts to accumulate. The second day of a practice is harder than the first. Novelty has worn off, but habit hasn't formed yet. Push through. Day 5 is easier. Day 5, expanding the practice. By day 5, something shifts. The resistance begins to soften. Here's your day 5 protocol. Execute 3 90-minute deep work sessions today. Yes, 3. This might seem like a lot, but remember, you're not working more total hours. You're working more focused hours. 3 90-minute sessions with proper breaks is 4.5 hours of deep work, more genuine concentration than most people achieve in an entire week. Today, add intentional boredom. During one of your breaks, do nothing. Sit quietly without any input. No phone, no book, no music, no podcast. Just sit with your thoughts for 10 minutes. This is uncomfortable by design. Your brain, addicted to constant stimulation, will protest. The urge to reach for something, anything, will be strong. Resist it. This practice of how to build mental resilience strengthens your capacity to tolerate the initial discomfort of focused work. Also today, notice the quality of your focus. Is it easier to enter concentration than it was on day 3? Are the urges less intense? Are you able to sustain attention longer before the first distraction impulse? These are signs that neuroplasticity is working. Your brain is already beginning to rewire. Alex noticed on day 5 that his urge count had dropped from 23 to 11. The urges themselves felt less urgent, more like whispers than demands. His mental clarity during deep work sessions had noticeably improved. The protocol was working. Day 6, stress testing. Day 6 introduces challenge. You're going to test your new neural pathways under pressure. Here's your day 6 protocol. Maintain your 3 deep work sessions, but today, schedule one of them during a time you'd normally consider non-ideal. If you usually work best in the morning, do one session in the afternoon. If you usually need perfect quiet, work in a coffee shop with some ambient noise. This stress test reveals the robustness of your new patterns. Can you enter deep work states even when conditions aren't perfect? Can you access concentration when your environment isn't optimized? Elite performers can focus anywhere, anytime, because their focus is internally generated, not externally dependent. Today, also practice the notification challenge. Turn your phone on for one of your deep work sessions, but with all notifications disabled. The phone is present but silent. This tests whether you can resist temptation even when the option is available. This is a higher level of dopamine control than simply removing the phone. If you fail, if you check your phone during the session, don't catastrophize. Simply note what happened, what triggered the behavior, and what you could do differently next time. Failure is data. Use it. Finally, today, share your protocol with someone. Tell a friend, family member, or colleague what you're doing. This social commitment increases accountability and makes the practice feel more real. Day 7, integration. Day 7 is about locking in the changes and preparing for the long term. Here's your Day 7 protocol. Execute your full, deep work practice. 3 90-minute sessions with proper breaks, shutdown ritual, intentional boredom practice. But today, do it with the awareness that this is your new normal. This isn't a temporary protocol. This is how you work now. Today, create your ongoing system. Write down the specific practices you'll continue beyond this week. Which elements of the protocol are non-negotiable? What will your daily schedule look like? How will you handle setbacks and slips? Document everything in a single page that you can reference whenever you need a reminder. Also today, measure your progress. Compare your focus capacity now to day 1. How many deep work sessions can you complete? How long can you sustain attention before the first urge? How has your screen time changed? This before and after comparison provides concrete evidence of your brain reset, proof that change is possible. Finally, set your intentions for the next phase. The 7-day protocol is complete, but your focus practice is just beginning. What projects will you tackle with your new capacity for deep work? What goals become possible now that you can concentrate? Let yourself feel the excitement of what's ahead. Alex completed day 7 with a sense of accomplishment he hadn't felt in years. In 1 week, his phone checks dropped from 147 to 34 per day. His screen time fell from 4.5 hours to 1.5 hours. He completed more deep work in 7 days than he had in the previous month combined. But the external metrics weren't the real transformation. Something had shifted inside. The constant mental noise had quieted. The anxiety of perpetual connectivity had faded. For the first time in years, Alex felt like he owned his own attention. He felt like himself again. Here's what happens after day 7. Some people expect the urges to disappear entirely. They don't, not immediately. What changes is their power. The urges become background noise instead of commanding demands. You notice them, acknowledge them, and continue with your chosen work. Over the next few weeks, the new patterns solidify. The startup ritual becomes automatic. The deep work sessions become something you look forward to rather than resist. The mental clarity you've achieved becomes your new baseline. And then something unexpected happens. You start to want less distraction. The phone that once seemed essential becomes genuinely unappealing. The scrolling that once felt pleasurable now feels hollow. Your brain has recalibrated its reward system, and the cheap dopamine hits of digital distraction can't compete with the deep satisfaction of focused, meaningful work. This is productivity at its deepest level, not grinding through more tasks, but transforming your relationship with attention itself. In the next chapter, we're going to explore how to maintain and expand this transformation. You'll learn how to reprogram your mind for deep work over the long term, building systems that sustain your new capacity for focus through the inevitable challenges ahead. The 7 days are complete. The reset has begun. Now, let's make it permanent. Chapter 8: Rewiring Your Reward System. Neuroscientists at Stanford University made a discovery that fundamentally changed our understanding of human motivation. They found that dopamine, the neurochemical driving nearly all human behavior, doesn't work the way anyone thought it did. For decades, researchers believed dopamine was the pleasure chemical. Feel good, get dopamine. Simple. But brain imaging studies revealed something far more profound. Dopamine isn't about pleasure at all. It's about anticipation. It's about wanting. And most importantly, it can be deliberately recalibrated. This discovery has staggering implications for anyone trying to build lasting focus and productivity. Because if dopamine can be hijacked, and we've established that it has been, it can also be deliberately rewired. In the next 12 minutes, you're going to learn how to reprogram your mind for deep work by restructuring your brain's reward system from the ground up. Not through willpower, not through restriction, through strategic neurological recalibration that makes focused work feel as compelling as your phone once did. This is the science of focus at its most fundamental level, and it changes everything. Let's start with what's actually happening in your dopamine system right now. Your brain has a baseline level of dopamine, a neurochemical set point that determines your default mood, motivation, and capacity for pleasure. When you experience something rewarding, dopamine spikes above this baseline, creating the sensation of enjoyment or satisfaction. Then it returns to baseline. But here's what modern digital technology has done to this system. Every time you check your phone and find something interesting, you get a dopamine spike. Every notification, every like, every novel piece of content triggers this response. The problem is frequency. You're spiking dozens, sometimes hundreds of times per day. Research from Dr. Anna Lemke at Stanford's Addiction Medicine Clinic has demonstrated that repeated dopamine spikes don't just return to baseline. They actually drop below baseline temporarily. This is called the opponent process response. Your brain, trying to maintain equilibrium, compensates for frequent highs by lowering your set point. The result is that your baseline dopamine level gradually decreases. Activities that once felt satisfying now feel flat. Tasks that once engaged your attention now feel boring. You need more stimulation just to feel normal. And deep work, which offers only slow, delayed rewards, feels increasingly impossible. This is why the modern brain struggles to focus. Your reward system has been recalibrated for constant stimulation. Anything less feels like deprivation. But neuroplasticity works in both directions. Just as your dopamine system was gradually rewired by digital overstimulation, it can be deliberately rewired by strategic understimulation. The same neural mechanisms that created the problem can solve it. A landmark study published in Nature Neuroscience demonstrated that dopamine receptor density, the number of receptors available to receive dopamine signals, can recover significantly after just 2 to 3 weeks of reduced stimulation. Participants who abstained from high dopamine activities showed measurable increases in receptor availability, which translated to improved mood, motivation, and cognitive performance. This is the neuroscience behind dopamine control. You're not just changing behavior. You're physically rebuilding the neural infrastructure that determines how reward feels. Here's what this means practically. The first week of any focus protocol feels terrible not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're doing something right. The discomfort is your brain recalibrating. The restlessness is your dopamine system resetting. The boredom is the feeling of neuroplasticity in action. Alex experienced this acutely during his first week. Everything felt flat. Activities he used to enjoy seemed pointless. He found himself wondering if something was wrong with him. But he'd learned enough about the neuroscience to understand. This was the dip before the rise. His brain was resetting its reward threshold. By week 2, colors started to seem brighter. Simple pleasures, a good meal, a walk outside, a conversation with a friend, began to feel genuinely satisfying again. Deep work, which had felt like grinding through concrete, started to generate its own subtle reward. His brain was recalibrating to a new, healthier baseline. Now let me show you how to accelerate this recalibration process. Average performers try to reset their dopamine system through pure restriction. They white-knuckle their way through abstinence, feeling deprived and resentful, counting the days until they can return to their old patterns. This approach fails almost universally because it addresses behavior without addressing the underlying reward structure. Elite performers understand that dopamine recalibration isn't about eliminating reward, it's about restructuring it. They don't just remove unhealthy dopamine sources. They strategically cultivate healthy ones. Here's the framework. First, identify your current dopamine hierarchy. List the activities that generate the most reward sensation for you right now. For most people, this list is dominated by digital sources: social media, video content, games, constant messaging. These high-intensity, low-effort rewards have colonized the top of your hierarchy. Second, consciously introduce earned dopamine activities. These are rewards that require effort before payoff. Completing a workout, finishing a deep work session, learning a new skill, creating something meaningful. The key is that the reward follows effort, not the reverse. Third, practice reward delay. When you complete focused work, don't immediately reach for your phone. Sit with the sense of accomplishment for a few minutes. Let your brain register the natural reward of productive work before introducing competing stimuli. This strengthens the neural connection between effort and satisfaction. Fourth, schedule strategic dopamine fasts. Once per week, spend a full day minimizing all high dopamine activities. No screens, no music, no podcasts, minimal food novelty. This accelerates receptor recovery and makes normal activities feel rewarding again. Let me tell you about the science of delayed gratification and how it relates to brain optimization. In the 1960s, psychologist Walter Mischel conducted the famous marshmallow test at Stanford. Children were offered a choice: 1 marshmallow now, or 2 marshmallows if they could wait 15 minutes. Follow-up studies found that children who could delay gratification showed better life outcomes decades later. Higher SAT scores, lower body mass index, better stress management. For years, researchers interpreted this as evidence that self-control was a fixed trait. Some people had it, others didn't. But recent research has completely reframed this finding. The ability to delay gratification isn't fixed, it's trained. And the key isn't willpower. It's reward system calibration. Children who succeeded at the marshmallow test weren't just better at self-control. They came from environments where delayed rewards were reliable. They had learned, through experience, that waiting pays off. Their dopamine systems had been calibrated to find anticipation rewarding rather than merely frustrating. This is exactly what you're doing with the Focus Reset protocol. You're teaching your brain that delayed rewards are worth waiting for. Every completed deep work session, every resisted urge, every hour of focus that leads to meaningful output, all of it is recalibrating your anticipation system. Over time, the anticipation of deep work completion starts generating its own dopamine. The prospect of a productive morning becomes genuinely exciting. Your brain learns to find the process of concentration rewarding, not just the outcomes it produces. Here's a critical insight about sustainable motivation and cognitive performance. Most people believe motivation precedes action. They wait until they feel like working before they begin. This is backwards, and neuroscience explains why. Dopamine isn't just released when you receive rewards. It's released when you take action toward rewards. The act of starting activates your reward system, which generates the motivation to continue. Action precedes motivation, not the reverse. This is why the hardest part of deep work is the first 5 minutes. Your brain hasn't yet registered that rewarding activity is underway. It's still in its default state, conserving energy and seeking the path of least resistance. But once you push through those initial minutes, dopamine starts flowing and the work itself becomes easier. Understanding this changes everything about how you approach your practice. Average performers wait for motivation before starting deep work. They check their emotional state, decide they're not in the zone, and postpone their focus session. They might wait hours or days for the right feeling that never comes. Elite performers start regardless of emotional state. They understand that motivation is generated by action, not the reverse. They trust that the feeling will follow the behavior. And because they start consistently, they build a track record of evidence that proves them right. Alex adopted this principle after his 7-day protocol. He stopped asking himself if he felt like doing deep work. He simply began at the scheduled time, trusting that his brain would catch up. Within minutes, it always did. The motivation he used to wait for now generated itself automatically. Let me give you one more advanced technique for neuroplasticity acceleration, the celebration practice. Neuroscientist B.J. Fogg at Stanford has demonstrated that emotional response immediately following a behavior dramatically increases the likelihood that behavior will be repeated. When you feel positive emotion after an action, your brain tags that action as worth repeating. The neural pathway strengthens. Most people don't celebrate completing deep work sessions. They just move on to the next task. They miss the opportunity to encode the behavior as rewarding. Here's what to do instead. Immediately after completing a focus session, before checking anything, before switching contexts, take 30 seconds to acknowledge what you just accomplished. Say out loud, "I did it." Smile. Feel genuine satisfaction. Let your brain register the success. This might feel artificial at first. Do it anyway. Your brain doesn't distinguish between genuine celebration and performed celebration. The neurological effect is the same. Over time, the celebration becomes natural because the association becomes real. Deep work equals satisfaction. Alex added this practice to his daily routine. After each 90-minute deep work session, he would close his laptop, take a breath, and say, "That was great work." He'd feel a small surge of satisfaction before moving to his break. Within weeks, he noticed that he actually looked forward to his focus sessions. The work itself had become rewarding. Here's the deeper truth about rewiring your reward system. You're not just changing your relationship to productivity. You're changing your relationship to pleasure itself. Modern technology has convinced billions of people that pleasure should be instant, effortless, and constant. This is a lie with devastating consequences. Instant pleasure, accessed constantly, destroys the capacity for deep satisfaction. The endless pursuit of dopamine hits leaves people feeling increasingly empty. True satisfaction, the kind that builds meaning and fulfillment, comes from a different source. It comes from challenge overcome, from skills developed, from meaningful work completed. It comes from the intentional living that becomes possible when your reward system is calibrated for depth rather than speed. This is what you're building. Not just focus, not just productivity. A fundamentally different relationship with what feels good and why. In the next chapter, we're going to explore how to sustain these changes over the long term. You've reset your dopamine system. You've recalibrated your reward structure. Now you'll learn how to maintain these gains through the inevitable challenges, setbacks, and temptations ahead. Because lasting transformation isn't about a single protocol. It's about building a life where deep focus isn't an effort, it's simply who you are. Chapter 9. Sustaining long-term focus. Here's something that the productivity industry will never tell you. The initial transformation is the easy part. Building focus over 7 days, resetting your dopamine system, completing your first deep work sessions. These are significant achievements. But they're not the real challenge. The real challenge is what happens on day 30, day 90, day 300. The secret that separates people who transform permanently from people who yo-yo back to old patterns isn't motivation. It isn't even discipline. It's something far more subtle, something I've observed in every elite performer I've studied but rarely see discussed in books like this. In the next 12 minutes, you're going to learn how to build mental resilience that withstands the inevitable challenges ahead. You'll discover the hidden architecture of sustainable focus habits, the systems that make lasting change not just possible, but inevitable. Because anyone can change for a week. The question is whether you can change for a lifetime. Let's start with an uncomfortable truth about behavior change. Research from University College London tracking habit formation found that the average time to automaticity, the point where a behavior becomes truly automatic, is 66 days, not 21 as popular wisdom suggests. But that's just the average. For complex behaviors like sustained deep work, the range extends to 254 days or more. This means that after your 7-day protocol, you're not finished. You're just beginning. The neural pathways you've started building are fragile. The old patterns, carved by years of repetition, are still strong. Without deliberate maintenance, regression is not just possible, it's probable. A study published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology found that 88% of people who make resolutions fail to maintain them long-term. Not because they lack desire, not because the initial change didn't work, but because they had no system for sustainability. This is where high-performance mindset becomes critical. You need to think differently about what you're building. This isn't a project with a completion date. It's an ongoing practice, like physical fitness or a meaningful relationship, that requires continuous investment. The first principle of sustaining long-term focus is designing for inevitable failure. Most people build systems that assume perfect compliance. They create ambitious schedules, commit to rigid routines, and expect themselves to execute flawlessly. When they inevitably slip, missing a deep work session, falling back into distraction for an afternoon, checking their phone compulsively during a stressful period, they interpret it as total failure. The system is abandoned. Old patterns return. Elite performers design differently. They assume they will fail. They build recovery mechanisms into their systems from the start. They create what researchers call failure protocols, predetermined responses to predictable setbacks. Here's how to build mental resilience into your focus practice. First, create an if-then recovery plan. Identify the most likely scenarios where your practice will break down: high stress, travel, illness, emotional difficulty, external crises. For each scenario, write a specific recovery protocol. If I miss a morning deep work session, then I will complete a shortened 45-minute session in the afternoon. If I spend a day lost in distraction, then I will restart my protocol the next morning without self-judgment. Second, implement the never miss twice rule. Missing one deep work session is an accident. Missing 2 in a row is the beginning of a new habit. No matter what happens, never allow 2 consecutive failures. This single rule prevents small slips from becoming complete collapses. Third, schedule regular system reviews. Once per week, spend 15 minutes evaluating your focus practice. What worked? What didn't? What needs adjustment? This ongoing refinement, keeps your system responsive to changing circumstances rather than rigid and brittle. Alex learned this lesson 6 weeks after completing his initial protocol. A family emergency pulled him away from his routine for 5 days. When the crisis passed, he found himself back at his old patterns, phone in hand, attention scattered, deep work feeling impossible. But because he built recovery mechanisms into his system, he knew exactly what to do. He didn't catastrophize. He didn't conclude that the protocol had failed. He simply activated his recovery protocol, one deep work session the next morning, followed by his standard routine. Within 3 days, he was back on track. The slip became a data point, not a defeat. The second principle is identity integration. Behavior change that depends on constant motivation is fragile. Behavior change that becomes part of your identity is permanent. Consider the difference between "I'm trying to focus more" and "I'm someone who does deep work." The first statement describes a goal. The second describes a self-concept. Goals can be abandoned. Identity persists. Neuroscience research on habit formation shows that identity-based behaviors activate different neural pathways than goal-based behaviors. When an action aligns with your self-concept, it requires less prefrontal cortex engagement, less willpower, less effort, less cognitive load. The behavior becomes automatic not because it's easy, but because it's who you are. Here's how to integrate mental discipline into your identity. Start by changing your language. Stop saying, "I'm trying to be more focused." Start saying, "I'm a deep work practitioner." Stop saying, "I'm cutting back on my phone." Start saying, "I'm not someone who's controlled by technology." The language shapes the self-concept, which shapes the behavior. Next, curate evidence for your new identity. Keep a record of every successful deep work session. Track your progress visibly. When you complete a focused week, acknowledge it. This evidence accumulates into proof that supports your identity claim. You're not pretending to be someone who focuses. You have concrete evidence that you are. Finally, associate with others who share the identity. The people around you shape your sense of what's normal. If your friends are constantly distracted, constantly on their phones, constantly complaining about productivity, that becomes your norm. Seek out people who value concentration, who protect their attention, who take cognitive performance seriously. The third principle is environment maintenance. The friction-based environment you created during the protocol requires ongoing attention. Left unmanaged, environments drift back toward distraction. Apps get reinstalled just for this one thing. Notifications get re-enabled just temporarily. The phone migrates back to the bedroom just for tonight. Each small compromise seems insignificant in isolation. Together, they recreate the distraction-rich environment you escaped. Average performers set up their environment once and assume it will persist. Elite performers treat environmental design as an ongoing practice. They conduct regular audits. They notice when friction has decreased. They proactively reinforce barriers before slippage becomes a problem. Here's your environmental maintenance protocol for daily habits for deep concentration. Weekly, review your screen time data. Has it crept upward? Check your phone's app inventory. Has anything been reinstalled? Verify that your website blockers are still active during deep work hours. Monthly, conduct a full friction audit. Walk through your digital environment as if seeing it for the first time. Where has friction decreased? Where are new distraction pathways forming? Reinforce barriers proactively. Quarterly, evaluate your physical workspace. Has clutter accumulated? Have new distractions entered? Is your deep workspace still optimized for focus? Redesign as needed. This ongoing maintenance might seem excessive. It's not. Your environment is under constant pressure from companies spending billions to capture your attention. Maintaining focus-friendly spaces requires continuous effort, just like maintaining physical health requires ongoing exercise. The fourth principle is strategic expansion. Once your basic focus practice is stable, typically after 2 to 3 months, you can begin expanding your capacity. The goal is gradual, systematic growth in your ability to sustain concentration. Start by extending session length. If you've been doing 90-minute deep work sessions, experiment with 120 minutes. If your prefrontal cortex can handle it, you'll know within a few sessions. If not, Return to 90 minutes without judgment. Next, increase session frequency. If you've been doing 2 deep work sessions daily, try adding a third. Observe how this affects your energy and the quality of your work. Find the edge of your capacity and work there. Then, challenge yourself with harder tasks. Use your protected focus time for the most cognitively demanding work you face. The difficulty of the task trains your concentration like weight trains muscle. Easy tasks don't build capacity. Finally, expand to new contexts. Practice deep work in environments that aren't perfectly controlled. A coffee shop, a hotel room, a busy office. The ability to focus regardless of circumstances is the mark of true peak focus mastery. Alex expanded his practice gradually over months. By month 3, he was completing 3 90-minute sessions most days. By month 6, he could enter deep work states almost anywhere, not because he was immune to distraction, but because he'd trained his brain to find focus even in imperfect conditions. The 5th principle is renewal and recovery. Sustainable focus isn't about maximizing concentration at all times. It's about oscillating between intense work and genuine rest. Without adequate recovery, even the best designed systems eventually break down. Research from the Human Performance Institute demonstrates that elite performers in every field, athletes, musicians, executives, surgeons, share a common pattern. They don't work more than others. They recover more intentionally. They protect their restoration with the same rigor they bring to their performance. Here's what intentional living looks like when applied to focus recovery. Daily, ensure at least 1 hour of screen-free time before bed. The blue light and cognitive stimulation of devices impair sleep quality, which directly degrades next-day focus capacity. Weekly, take 1 full day with minimal digital engagement. This digital Sabbath allows deep recovery of dopamine receptors and attention systems. Spend time in nature, with family, in reflection, anything that isn't optimized for engagement. Quarterly, take an extended break from all productivity systems. A long weekend or a full week where you do no deep work, follow no protocols, and simply exist. This prevents burnout and often generates insights that improve your practice when you return. The paradox is that deliberately reducing effort periodically increases capacity over time. Rest isn't the opposite of productivity. It's the foundation of it. Here's what I want you to understand about sustaining focus for the long term. The path ahead isn't linear. There will be periods of extraordinary concentration and periods where everything falls apart. This isn't failure. This is the nature of sustainable change. What matters isn't perfect consistency. What matters is the trend line. Are you, on average, more focused than you were 6 months ago? Are the slips shorter and the recoveries faster? If yes, you're succeeding. Alex learned to measure his progress in months, not days. Some weeks were frustrating. Some days, old patterns reasserted themselves with alarming strength. But over 6 months, the projects completed, the skills developed, the satisfaction found in work that once felt impossible. The progress was undeniable. In the final chapter, we're going to zoom out even further, beyond the protocols and the techniques, beyond the neuroscience and the systems. We're going to explore what becomes possible when focus isn't just something you practice, but something you've become. Because the focused life isn't just about getting more done. It's about becoming more fully yourself. And that transformation is closer than you think. Imagine waking up tomorrow with something you may have forgotten is possible: mental clarity. No fog, no split attention, no invisible pull toward unfinished tasks. You sit to work, not with resistance, but with steady absorption. Hours pass. You finish what matters. And afterward, you feel genuine fulfillment, the kind that comes from using your mind fully. This is the focused life. A year after his focus reset, Alex barely recognized himself. The anxious, scattered person who couldn't finish a task without reaching for his phone felt like a memory. His results changed first. Projects that once dragged now flowed. He saw insights others missed. Promotions followed, not because he worked more, but because he worked with depth. The real transformation was internal. Constant low-level anxiety faded. Moments of clarity once rare became his everyday baseline. He was present in conversations, experiences, and his own life. Without the pull of notifications, his relationships deepened. Days no longer blurred. They were lived, not scrolled past. By this point, you understand how attention works, why it fails, how it can be rebuilt, and what fragments it. You have a system, not just tips. And Alex's story proves it's possible. The real question now isn't, can you transform your focus? It's, will you? Focus isn't just about productivity. It's the foundation of a meaningful life. Distraction doesn't just waste time, it steals life. A focused life gives it back. Picture yourself 12 months from now. Deep work is routine. Your environment supports focus. Compulsive phone checking has faded. Work that once overwhelmed now feels simple. You notice more, feel calmer, grounded, capable, and happier. Attention is freedom. Reclaiming focus reclaims agency. Alex found this freedom. His attention belonged to him again. Yours can too. Begin today. Start with the attention audit. Install friction. Complete your first deep work session. Within a year, you'll live with clarity, not noise. The focused life isn't waiting for someday. It begins with a decision. Make it now.